Please, let's wait for Miss Caroline.
You stay if you like. What have I to fear in a nursery? Susan.
Welcome to Kermode Uncut. There's a new film out today called The Little Stranger. It's the new film by Lenny Abrahamson, who made Room and Adam and Paul, and he's a really, really interesting director. And he worked before with Donald Gleason on Frank, which was this really wonderful, sort of strange, surreal, musical adventure. Well, Donald Gleason is back with Lenny Abrahamson for The Little Stranger. He plays a doctor, Dr. Faraday, who, after the war, is sent to a house which, as a young child, he became completely fascinated by, entranced by, spellbound by. Now that he returns to it later on, grown up, after the war, he discovers the house and its inhabitants are slowly falling apart. And there is a suggestion that the house is haunted, that there is a ghost haunting the corridors. It's an interesting film. It's had some problems because how do you market it? And on the one hand, there's a gothic horror element, but it's not really a horror film. I mean, tonally, it's closer to something like The Devil's Backbone, the Guillermo del Toro film, which I really love. And when Donald Gleason came on the Radio 5 live show that I did with Simon Mayo, he said, look, it's not a horror movie, because it isn't. It's a kind of psychological thriller. But it made me start thinking about ghost stories, and specifically about books and films of ghost stories. There is a wonderful kind of ur-text for modern ghost stories, which is called The Haunting of Hill House. It's written by Shirley Jackson, and it was famously adapted into a film by Robert Wise as The Haunting. It's one of the most famous horror movies of all time. It's really, really creepy. It was remade later on in a much more sort of explosive and frankly unmoving fashion. In his book Danse Macabre, Stephen King writes about The Haunting of Hill House, the novel, as being the source of pretty much everything that we now think of as the modern ghost story. And the idea in Haunting of Hill House is that a woman goes to a house which is apparently haunted, and when she's there, she kind of finds herself. And Stephen King said that when he was writing The Shining, he was basically trying to do a riff on The Haunting of Hill House, that idea of Jack Torrance going to the Overlook Hotel, and when he gets there, he sort of comes face to face with himself. And it's an idea that runs through pretty much all modern ghost stories. It's a very, very recurrent idea. There is a very famous novel called Ghost Story, written by Peter Straub, in which he attempted to take all modern ghost stories and put them together in one great big tale. That was adapted as a film, a not very successful film, it has to be said, because there was so much in the book, it was very hard to compress it. There's a central thread that runs all the way through Ghost Story, and it's this. Our anti-hero has fallen in love with a mysterious, alluring woman, and one night he wakes up and she's looking out of the window into the night sky, and her back is turned to him, and then she turns and she says something, and he's half asleep and he mishears it, and the first time he thinks that what she says is, I saw a ghost. And then later on, he realizes that no, that wasn't what she said. What she said is, I am a ghost. And then even later on, he accepts that she didn't say that either. What she said was, you are a ghost. And Peter Straub writes that this is the central realization at the heart of all ghost stories. Now, you can see this theme echoing throughout literature. I mean, even from children's literature, you look at Tom's Midnight Garden, or you look at The Amazing Mr. Blunden, which is originally The Ghost, it's there. You look at a movie like Christopher Nolan's Interstellar, it's there again. It's not a plot spoiler to say that The Little Stranger, which is based on a story by Sarah Waters, once again comes back to this idea that you go out to look in. If you see The Little Stranger and you love it, great. Don't go expecting a sort of blood and guts gothic shocker. It's something much more low-key than that. But if you see it and you like it, here's a bit of advice. I know I'm a film critic and I talk about films, I talk about The Shining, and I talk about the film of The Haunting. But if you get a chance, go back and read the novel of Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House. Not only is it one of the greatest pieces of literature I've ever read, it's up there with F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, but more and more it becomes apparent that Stephen King was quite right. The Haunting of Hill House really is the source of all modern ghost stories.
Betty, what are you doing here?
You rang for me, miss.
I did not.
Was this spell that wrong?
Rang itself, did it?
What is all the noise?